Ogwaya'dodogehsdoh. So as RJ mentioned, I am a registered dietitian. I live in 6 nations of the Grand River, Cayuga Wolf Clan. And I've been a dietitian a little bit over 15 years now. My practice has evolved considerably since being back home in my community here. I spent obviously a number of years off my nation to go to school and to gain the education, knowledge, and support to become a dietitian. And so coming back home was really important, and I've had the opportunity to work in a number of different spaces. I've worked in frontline and clinical care. I've worked in community programming, policy development, and data governance, and then as well as a traditional knowledge share. So I've had quite the opportunity to learn and to grow and develop my relationship with food and its meaning to me over the years. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit of information about my traditional background. So I think that's always one of the big issues that we have to make consideration of, when we talk about, land sovereignty, it's going to look different to everybody. Each First Nation has its own geographical space and area that it's occupied since time immemorial, and the way that they see their relationship with that land and the water and the air is very particular and unique to their people. So with that consideration, I mean, all I've known to learn, even though I had the opportunity to Google or maybe, read books and even work in some other First Nation communities, the core of my relationship with food and land and water has been from the Haudenosaunee teachings of my people. And that's, a really important practice in sovereignty and self, and then sovereignty in space as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, reciprocity, a concept called the dish, some rotating crops and hunting grounds, so ways of being with food from my community's perspective, working with nature, and then who is food sovereign, as a question to kind of have that consideration. And then again, land stewardship are the path that's set down. So how the Haudenosaunee practice food sovereignty? I think this has been something that I've come into learn, again, like I said, only being inside my community, having the connections, having the connections with my traditional community. And it's not always something that's afforded to everybody. That was the whole intention through cultural genocide, was to remove Indians, from their lands, from their homes, from their families, from their sustenance, right? That was the goal. And then while they had them removed, they were to, have an erasure of their being and identity. And in that confusion of, 100+ years of our generations, I think that, we have felt a little bit lost, and people are unsure of where they belong or what their identities are. And, really, I think it comes back to, how you build relationship wherever you are. And I think that's one of the main teachings from my people as well, that, there's a concept of being an urban Indigenous person or an on reserve. And it's like, that's not something that's ever communicated or talked about. Those are terminologies that are imposed by whether they're reporting or funding guidelines from government and, policy officials. But I mean, we don't define ourselves that way, right? If you're Indigenous, that is with you, and your ancestors are with you wherever you are. And to be honest, there's no urban dichotomy, because that was Indigenous land and space before the urban identity of the municipality even existed. So again, it's an imposition of thinking. So I think the culture and ceremony of my Haudenosaunee people have instilled in me the ability to be able to walk into those spaces as a, allied health professional, as a knowledge sharer, and to be able to identify when these roadblocks exist. And it's not the main roadblock, because when you do have connection to culture and ceremony and language, those things are helping to define your relationship with the environment around you. And again, that's what our culture and ceremonial um, space looks like in Haudenosaunee lands, well, especially here on Six Nations. So we have a longhouse community, and the longhouse community are the people that we would acknowledge as faith keepers, and people, women and men, and anybody in the community that really wants to contribute into the acknowledgement, the support, the guidance, and the path to our language and ceremonies. And the reason that the language and ceremonies are so important is because the way that Haudenosaunee people communicate. So in this specific area of Six Nations, there's literally like 6 different nations here in one area. Typically, First Nations will have a full First Nation identity of a nation, but here on Six Nations, it's a much larger, like the population is well over 30,000. And the land base is quite large as well. And we have a representation of 6 different nations: the Onondagas, the Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca, and the Tuscarora. Um, they're all having a representation here of identity within the community. So it's quite robust. But we don't all have practicing cultural space here. So the Tuscarora and the Oneida people don't have what's called long houses here on Six Nations, which is, the long house is the way that our people used to live. That's actually what the Haudenosaunee, that's what it is for us. It's the people of the long house. We always lived collectively together. We were stronger in our clans to live in the large homes that way. So you would have multiple clan families. Like I said, I'm Wolf Clan. You'd have multiple clan families living in the space. And then you could also have an extended family with the other nations. So if a full Cayuga Nation lived in a certain area together, the Wolf Clan would have their large living space. They'd have a specific clan and home for Wolf Clan members. And that would mean that you can actually extend the wolf, because the other nations also have those clans as well. And you could extend your area, your family, your support to other nations by your clan. So it wasn't, that was just as important as holding a nation-based identity, which they're not nationalist type positions either. Like Gayakono, it's the people of the swamp area. So it's not like it's a flag driven name. Like it's it only told other people where we lived, what we lived around. That's what it was. So it reminded us again of our place in the environment, and our place to be respected. Like if you're in the swamp type areas, that's the place where my people would have flourished, because that's just where they contribute into learning. Every single day they learned about that living environment, and that's what we became known as, those types of people, Gayakono, right? And other nations have that same representation. It doesn't have like even though Ganada or Canada is a Mohawk word, it doesn't have that connotation of that same Western type nationality attached to it. So again, breaking, who we are down to naming our clans after animals, right? Things that live in that environment that we called our people after, the swamp people, and then we had the wolf clan and different other, heron clan, Svenjadigas, etc. So naming our clans, our groupings after animals made it very important to, again, remember what does that animal do to survive? How has it been gifted the ability to live and be here before us and well after us? And we need to respect that and honor that. And that's why we took on clans in that way, to be able to remember our place in the larger environment. So that type of ceremony and process is carried on and who we are as Haudenosaunee people. So it contributes again into our food sovereignty space, because each clan and nation holds a responsibility to continue the communication, whether it's through songs or speeches or physical acts like dancing. Those types of things are ways that we, I guess you'd call them ceremony, but that's really what we're doing when we're actually paying homage or respect to the animals and the foods that have been able to sustain us, right? The lands and the water and the air, all of those things are communicated and talked about in some sort of form or fashion in our ceremony at these houses, right? These long houses that we go to. You don't have to be in a longhouse to be able to do those ceremonies. It's just you're getting, it'd be equivalent to when you're going to university and you're getting the people at the top of the list of people that could share some information. That's who run these houses here in this community. Those people have been enacting the ceremonies, and they use the language day to day, and they've been able to carry that on for generations. And that's the benefit of going and being a part and engaged with the home. It helps to build that home and uplift it as well. And that's reciprocity in relationships. So that's really important. And then again, they're the ones to carry and teach the protocols and the processes of our responsibilities. So I think that's a really important aspect that, it doesn't often get carried along, but I've said so much in just explaining about how we structure ourselves as a people, about how that also needs to have a representation for you to build space in food sovereignty, because you have to remember you're not there alone. You're not a sole sovereign partner, that there's relation that needs to be considered. And that's how Haudenosaunee people step into that place. So Haudenosaunee people, again, that's the kind of internal workings of who we are. But we obviously have always in time had relations with others, other nations, other clans, and other people, right? Colonists, etc. So in that space of, you know, carrying only responsibility with us about what does the relationship that I carry with this land, air, and water have to do with my sustenance and the sustenance of those coming after me. And what we did was form these type of agreements with others when we came in contact with them, because it's the same thinking when I'm saying, like, we don't teach that when you leave this made up border that is really, it was only truly supposed to be reserved for our use. That's what reserved land means to us. It's reserved for our use and not yours. You can use other land elsewhere, but this, we've communicated it to be reserved for our use. We didn't reserve it as a place for us to live and stay on and not leave the border. That wasn't part, like, if you think about in the negotiation and communication, that doesn't sound as if that's something that we would do. So the communication of reserve land being like, well, that's where you live and that's where your Indianness resides, that's not true. like I said, it resides in you and wherever you are. So even if you're in, these municipalities that came after the fact, well after the fact, hundreds of years after the fact, that doesn't determine your indigeneity, right? Or your identity. And that's again why it comes back to being able to connect again to these ceremonies and these responsibilities. And the dish, wampum, if you Googled it, you'll find this beautiful beaded piece that really looks to help explain really what we are holding responsibility to. We're holding first a responsibility to ourselves, and then the responsibility of ourselves is going to be projected and engaged with responsibility of others. And in that communication, we have to come to some sort of understanding. So we spoke to the dish as being a visual, because again, we're these other nations don't speak, even the ones here on Six Nations, like the Seneca, don't speak our Gayakono language. We speak completely different languages. So we had a visual form to be able to communicate our responsibility. And this form here of the dish, it's speaking to that. In this dish of prosperity and sustainability, of sustenance, it's just one dish. That's all you get. That's all I get, right? And we have to be responsible to one another while we're utilizing this dish, right? There is no utensils or anything else attached to the dish, right? The mark in the middle, the white mark in the middle has a representation. That's just all of the sustenance. That's, clean air, clean water, and, really healthy land. That's the sustenance and everything that's in it, is that white part in the middle. And we are in that dish together. So that's what we have to understand, that we all have a responsibility to this sustenance. So how are we going to act? How do we hold responsibility to that? And that would be communicated on, whatever aspects that certain nations had to offer others. There was always, bartering and trade and, economy. All of that stuff it's always been a reality, right? How could we get this far if we didn't have that? So what the Cayuga would bring into the trade would be different items that they could share, right? They could share what they created in abundance. And what we were really good at in creating in abundance was corn and beans and multiple varieties of them, right? Squash was also something that rotated from the winter to the kind of summertime. So it was something that we utilized to help keep our immune system strong. Beans were a wonderful protein source for us that we could have, when hunting or fishing, which is very, very difficult to do, wasn't able to sustain the entirety of the village. We had this other crop, and multiple varieties of them. If you look at all the beautiful colors of corn and beans and the different types of squash, like all of those are carrying different antioxidants and anthocyanins with them, right? Like those are wonderfully important to be able to support immune function going from season to season to season to season. So that was something that our people had always known was really important. We may not have known the nutritional, dealings of it and how I communicate it back then, like in that way. We knew it did stuff to help heal and heal different things, but down to the minute nutritional quality part of it, as my mind as a dietitian, that wasn't articulated in the same way. But we did know, even within the environmental aspect and sustainability aspect, that those crops, when planted together, actually supported a healthy, sustainable environment. So it wasn't going to deplete the water or the soil in the area, as as quickly. We could catch and move the rotation of the crops to different areas before, because we had such a beautiful relationship, right, going on between these different foods. So as the corn grows very high, it gives the beans the space to wind around them and to grow, and grow up instead of growing down and across. And then when you have beautiful leaves from the squash, they're such big leaves that they can create a nice um, barrier from the sun to help keep that soil moist around, because the corn really needs that. Once that dries out, the corn, because it's so heavy, even though it can root quite deep, it can't hold. So if the big winds come, any of that stuff comes, it can actually just knock them right over. So having that really strong soil and nice balance of water and moisture for it really helps. And the beans are actually giving the nitrogen back into the soil as well, as they're growing. So there again, I mean, there was no scientist out there doing the tests and talking about all this stuff. We just knew, because we were so in tune with the environment. Like, we didn't have TVs and games and distractions, right? Like, all we did was live, like live to be sustained, happy, joyous, prosperous, right? And that's the kind of things that our people really paid attention to. So again, the working with nature part was another opportunity for us to gain prosperity for our people by introducing different acts or different ways to honor that. And we still do this today in our community here. We do what's called the Thanksgiving address, or the Ganohanyok in my language. And it's something that the more you're able to speak and connect into your culture and language, the more you can actually express yourself about in our languages how grateful you are. Like, that ideology of Thanksgiving that happens once a year in the Western culture, that's what we do every single day. So that's where it comes from, right? The environment has always been so important to us that we wanted to wake up every day and remind ourselves of all of the beauty and benefit and abundance that we were living in. Because sometimes we weren't. Sometimes it's hard in the winter. Could you imagine being outside, in the winter months in this time? And, if you didn't have crops or you didn't have enough, like, times were very difficult. They were much, different perceptions back then. So any inkling of thanks and acknowledgement that you could carry with you, um, it helps you to build, value in yourself, that you do have, you're not without, that you are surrounded by, these loving gifts, that you're worthy of those loving gifts. And that's what the Thanksgiving address is to our people. And we say it, like, our kids say it. They don't sing "O Canada" down here in these schools. They do the Thanksgiving address. Those kids come and communicate in their languages over the PA system, everything that they're thankful for. And they rotate the kid. The kid will change all the time. So everyone gets an opportunity to talk about how grateful they are for the gifts that they have been given, and how worthy they are of those gifts as well. And that's a really important aspect, to make sure that we continue to build relationship with the environment around us. If the children have to learn to communicate and talk about the things they see, they have to be out there looking at them, touching them, thinking about them, talking with them. They have to be connected to it. And that's how, we really work with nature in our communities. So again, I did mention that language is such an important aspect. And, we do have a number of different wellness modalities in our community that are actually tied to those ceremonies as well. Um, like I said, the foods that are honored and communicated and talked about at certain times at ceremony those foods carry nutritional value that's needed at that time, right? We're coming right now into maple syrups, right? The trees will be honored and sang to in ceremony. And right now, that's magnesium, that's zinc. Those are things that help with any sort of repair to the body that needed to be done through times of sickness or maybe even times of some famine, and not high nutritional value. But those trees are giving that back to us. Those trees are sharing that with us, and we're going to honor and respect that. And that's the first new year, the new food that we're giving thanks to. So this is our New Year's time right now. It didn't happen on January 1st. In our community, it happens right now. And, you know, these ceremonies are also communicated to us about when to take place through the stars, right? When certain star patterns, um, you know the pattern of the Pleiades. When that star pattern comes out and it's around and above our community, that tells us that we're at the midwinter mark. And now we're going to start thinking our minds moving into spring and renewal. And that's when we start to communicate again to the environment. What do we need to honor? And it starts again, like I said, with the trees. And then we'll go on from there with the seeds and then the planting, etc. And again, that's what the Haudenosaunee wellness model from this private school down here, Ogwaya'dodogehsdoh, we're very fortunate to have here in Six Nations. They only give teachings day to day in Mohawk and Cayuga to students that go there. These are privately funded schools, though. They're not funded by Indigenous Services Canada or the federal government. That's our community funding these private cultural schools in order to make sure that these ideologies and loving gifts of our people continue to live on. So again, land stewardship, you know, it's the path set down for resilience and resistance. And I love this picture here because it really does kind of, that's what it looks like. It can be circular in nature, but it's going to move you in multiple directions and take you to where you need to be to learn different lessons along your journey. And that's like I said, what it means for each one of us to be able to be rooted and grounded in who we are. And as long as the culture and the language that you're tied to helps you to identify that, it gives you the opportunity to be able to carry your responsibilities forward. And that's the only thing that you have control of. So that's the thing you want to put the most energy and work into, right? Because you can't control the larger environments. You can't control municipalities. You can't, like, when it comes to foods, etc. Like, you can start small gardens and then you hope that it can grow from there. Or you can start foraging and hunting or fishing and hope that it can grow from there to gain community, etc. out of it. And, you know, another way to do it, if you have the opportunity again, is to make sure that you have Indigenous people, if you're not Indigenous, involved in this, because they're the ones that are going to be able to share the depth and the knowledge of that relation with that food. That carries on beyond, like, it's just a nutritional value set or a nutritional aspect or an affordability aspect, right? It actually, like, creates self and personal responsibility. So that's a little bit of information. This is my email if you have any questions, and you know, I'm sure there's questions in the chat. I can't see it right now, but yeah, thank you.